For a project that has a lot of content or a lot of different users involved in your content process, getting your site structure set up initially is great, but it's sort of only the beginning of the work. When you have more than a few people who are involved in your entire process for publication on a site, things can get complicated really quickly. Websites like newspapers or online magazines, or honestly any site that has a lot of content or a lot of different people involved, or in particular a combination of the two, are going to need some kind of tool to help with the review process. They need to be able to review and edit and publish things in a way that doesn't step on each other's toes. So in this series, we're going to be building out a full editorial workflow process for a news site. In this lesson, we're going to look at the use case. What is the project that we're building? What are the requirements that we need to meet? And then we're going to talk about how we're going to implement that. What contributed modules, what aspects of core are we going to use so that we can meet the needs of our client in this particular use case? So let's get started and see what we're going to be building.
Our Media is a Vancouver-based independent news website. The content is mainly produced by volunteers, and there's a small staff of paid editors who actually manage the website for everything. And they make sure the volunteers know where like the next press conference is taking place or things that need to actually be reported on. And they go ahead and do the process for reviewing, editing, publishing, making sure everything actually works on the website. Now, recently the site has grown, it's gotten really popular, and they've decided that they need to delegate some of this editorial workflow because the small team is just not able to actually keep the throughput going. So after they've had a couple of meetings, they've decided that they want to have a few upgrades to their site. So the main things that they're going to want is they want to be able to have each team who works on sort of a general topic of content on the site to be able to manage that content themselves. So we want to be able to have groups. So if we have something that's, say, in the culture section of the site, we want to be able to have the culture team be able to manage all of that content without having to use all of the actual staff time to manage all of that. So as part of setting that up, they want to be able to make it so that each team can see the stuff that's in their section and also be limited to that and not see all of the other things. They could give everyone on the site access to everything, but that would be a little bit overwhelming for a lot of these volunteers, and it could create confusion between various teams working on things. So we want to have an editorial interface that the volunteer editors are going to be able to easily find what it is that they need to work on, and the editors should be able to review that content and send it back to the reporter if needed and talk about what's happening there. They need to be able to edit the content and then move it through sort of a pipeline or a workflow to know what state content is currently in and what the next step is and when is it actually ready to be published. So in terms of actually implementing this, one of the things that Drupal core does is it allows administrators to change the default publishing settings for each content type. So we go into just a content type, say, and we edit. If you scroll down, you can see that we have like publishing options. So is it published by default or not? Promoted to the front page and that kind of thing. So core provides us with that stuff. The process of actually checking whether something's published or not, going into the individual piece of content, checking the publish box is kind of a pain. And so what we're going to be looking at is using the Workbench module to help us ease this entire workflow that we need. One of the nice things that Workbench module provides is this My Workbench menu item. And if I go here, I essentially get a dashboard of the content that I'm responsible for or dealing with. Now, I'm logged in as an admin, so I'm seeing kind of everything and sort of maybe something that like a staff member would actually end up seeing. So I have this wonderful little dashboard. I can go here. I don't have to go into the content listing of Drupal core and figure out what's happening there. I get everything that I need that's pertinent to me right here in this dashboard. Workbench integrates really well with Drupal core, so you don't have to necessarily use lots of different Workbench-isms, as it were. For example, Workbench integrates really well with the Drupal core Taxonomy module, so we can use the taxonomy that we want to have on the site for our sections, and Workbench will be able to use that instead of us having to also create something else specific for Workbench. One of the things that we want to be able to also do is limit what people have access to in terms of their designated section or their topic that they are allowed to be working on. So once we set up the taxonomy on the site and we have Workbench, we can use Workbench Access to indicate what sections we have on the site and who's going to have access to those. In this site that we've built, we have a new section. This is a vocabulary, and then these are the terms within that vocabulary. Now, again, as an admin, I have access to the entire news section, but we're going to create roles and users who only have access to these individual topics within the news section. And that's going to be able to give us that limited Workbench view for people who should only be able to have access to culture. That's all they're going to see. The last big piece to this is actually creating a workflow so that we can actually see what states a particular piece of content needs to move through in order for it to get to be published. So in addition to Workbench and Workbench Access, we're also going to be using Workbench Moderation, which is another part of that Workbench package when you download it. This lets you create custom states and then lets you indicate which states a piece of content is allowed to move between and who is allowed to move it. So if I look at my drafts, this is my content that I've actually had some activity on. And you can see that I can moderate this. It's currently in a needs review state, and I can move it to any of the other states that we have created on the site already. So when it's finally ready for publication, we can publish it from here. Or if we need to bounce it up to a higher level of review, I can do something like that. And that changes the moderation state, and whoever has access to that will be able to see that. So Workbench is definitely going to be the main tool that we're using, and we're going to integrate that with Taxonomy along with Pathauto just to give us some nice URLs and some easy ways to track where our taxonomy terms are in terms of navigating around the site.